What is up, guys? Welcome to the special episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my great co-host, Raul Hanna. And today, we are going to be previewing Paraguay's next match against Bolivia at the Defensores del Chaco on Tuesday. And what better way to have someone to talk about La Verde than Tim Venables, a Bolivian football expert. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we had him on to talk about that Bolivia game over there in in La Paz, and now we get him back again. So, Tim, glad to be back. Glad to see you back here. And, I guess for those that maybe haven't listened to that episode, or for anyone that maybe doesn't know who you are, can you tell a little bit of the audience about your connection to Bolivian football?
Well, basically, to cut it short, my dad, thanks for having me on anyway. First of all, it's always a great pleasure to listen to you because, like I was saying last time, it's quite hard to actually find content about Paraguay in English that people in England can listen to. And I get my cousin and my school friends, and they all ask me things now and again before they're going to bet or something. So, yeah, you help. You're of a help. You're not doing it in vain. And the connection in Bolivia was my dad was posted there in the 90s, and I was there, and I've always been football stat crazy. So I started keeping stats, and just even though we left 20 years ago, I keep my eye on it, and I'm in most of the journalists' WhatsApp groups. So just keep my eye on the ground.
Always got to be up aware with everything that's going on, especially in this part of the world. So I respect it. I
Yeah.
guess the one thing that we do have to see and really give any sort of respect, if at all, is Bolivia, because currently, at the time of recording, we're coming off their third game of the World Cup qualifiers. Again, another loss for them, although they did have some light in that game against Ecuador in La Paz, where they did score the equalizer, but ultimately it was a
Yeah.
last-minute goal from Kevin Rodriguez to give Ecuador all 3 points, which means that Bolivia are still in last place, no wins, 0 points. And I guess, going into that, really, how have you assessed Bolivia so far during this campaign? I mean, it's going to be very difficult for any team to qualify for the World Cup from South America. But now with these expanded slots, it gives teams like Bolivia a chance to, aspire to go and qualify for the World Cup here in North America. So I just want your thoughts on how you've seen Bolivia so far in these first three games under a manager that, Ralph and I have always talked about during his time in Paraguay, and you definitely have beforehand in Gustavo Costas.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of things we can talk about there. One is the fact that I think we discussed last time the fact that Bolivia's really gone backwards since '94, and unfortunately, I think that Farias was probably their best chance, or as good as it was going to get. And I mean, we could get into a long discussion there about managers, but the fact of the matter is, and I'm sure most of us who are Paraguayan can relate to this, Berrizo and Barros Esqueloto were sort of parachuted in, and they didn't know anything about us. And now the hope is with Garnero that he was here. He's been here for 4 or 5 years, like Tata was before Tata took us to South Africa. And in Bolivia's case, and I think I mentioned this to Ralph Fair, the trouble is Costas was very successful in Peru, very successful here, very successful in Argentina, but he got parachuted in a year ago into Bolivia. He doesn't know anything. So it's the same problem that we had with Berrizo or the Mellizos. So I don't really see how they're going to get anywhere. He has been trying to do things, but there's so much going on aside from football. I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware, but it got called off last year, and they had to just leave the championship there. Like they didn't manage to finish it because of blockades, and then this year, Evo Morales, who used to be the president, is a Coca trade unionist, and he got a team into the first division called Atlético Palmaflor, and the government is at war with him now, so they've started cutting off all the drug trade. So he didn't have money to play his players. And so he realized he was going to get relegated. So he accused Always Ready and Independiente of fraud and of match fixing, which I don't know if it's true or not. But the fact of the matter is, you can just see the amazing upheaval that there is, and so many other interests, politics, drugs, the lot, and football's like trying to go along, but it's just everything's tied to one another. Do you get me? So it's like Costas is trying to do a job, but like last month, that the league was suspended for 35 days because of the match fixing thing. But then he wasn't allowed to work with his players. And now, before the Ecuador game, they had 3 days in La Paz to get ready. 3 days. And he does what he can, but I mean, he's on a hiding to nothing, if you ask me. And I mean, to make matters worse, their really good player, Roberto Carlos Fernandez, who's actually playing in Russia, he got a 2-game ban for getting sent off against Argentina, so he wasn't even able to play these games. And he took the decision before the Ecuador game that he'd actually get rid of the four of the 6 veterans because they weren't really up to scratch. They weren't doing anything. So he got rid of Ursino, Salcedo, and Diego Bejarano, who really have been like the backbone of the team. And the only the players he's kept on are Lampe, the goalkeeper, Martins, who in his own words is past it for international football, and Ramiro Vaca, who has done a lot of things over time for the national side, but he's on the bench for Bolivia. So what's he going to do on the bench and suddenly come and play? So if you take all that into account, then I think they did relatively well against Ecuador, but it's pretty dire, the situation. And I mean, like I said before, I really think that Farias was as good as they were going to get, because in the before the previous campaign, he was with the strongest for 3 years. So he really got a feel for the country and understood the players. But now they're just clutching at straws, unfortunately. And last month, when they played Argentina and Brazil, there were journalists who were saying they had never seen Bolivian so lost. And that's quite something for Bolivia.
That's where I was going to go with my first question, Tim, was there's been lots of crises in Bolivian football over the years, but it does seem at the moment this is one of the worst, and particularly just going to the match fixing and so the local league getting suspended. What have those players been able to do for 35 days? Were they even able to train at the clubs, or how have they been trying to stay in shape?
Well, Bolívar are very, very professional, and they've got all these Europeans watching them and monitoring CCTV and the works. And you actually saw how Bolívar did in the Libertadores. You can tell that they're at another level physically and mentally. But generally, I mean, they try to keep them in check, but it's very hard. I mean, when you've got other circumstances filtering in, it affects you. It affects your state of mind. It affects everything. Football's part of society ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, and so one of the things I was thinking about there is it is a team in a bit of crisis. It is very difficult. I think the mental factor is going to have to play so much as they travel to Paraguay. What do you feel about Marcelo going there, Marcelo Martins, and Gustavo Costas, I guess, kind of returning to Paraguay, where they might have a bone to pick with a few people and want to, silence a few people? Do you think that's going to work in Bolivia's favor, or maybe it's just too much of a stretch for them?
I think that they'll probably be a bit demoralized after what happened with Ecuador. And although looking back, one of their best games was here. Do you remember? The 2-2 draw. They really played to Paraguay's weaknesses. Like they weren't putting crosses in to be headed. They were knocking them back to the edge of the penalty area, and that's how Martin scored. And I don't know if Costas actually has a vendetta with Paraguay, because I think he actually won a lot of laudits with what he did with Guarani, particularly. Martins, yeah, I think he did. He did. It didn't end well with Cerro. He came and it was made very public the amount of money he was making, and he didn't fit in, and he had a bit of bad luck as well, and there was turmoil. But I don't know if he's that sort of character. I've heard him a couple of times, and I think he's more worried that he wants to keep playing for Bolivia, but he knows that he's past it. Which is quite unusual for some players, isn't it? Because a lot of players have got quite a bit of an ego.
He maybe feels a kind of responsibility, I suppose, to help them through this transition.
Yeah.
I was going to ask.
He'll probably end up working with management afterwards.
That makes sense. I was going to ask. Looking at you like stats a lot, so just could you give us maybe the head-to-heads of kind of Paraguay, Bolivia, in especially Bolivia's away record, which we know isn't brilliant.
Well, I think we'd never dropped a point against them until this time.
Correct.
Which was the 2-2 draw. And actually, talking about that, sorry to go off on a tangent, but I was looking at Bolivia Ecuador before the last game, and you know that Ecuador have won, including the last game now, they've won 12 out of 14 games against Bolivia and drawn the other 2. And their record in La Paz in the last 6 is 1-4, drawn 2. So I think Ecuador are actually using that as part of their ploy to get to the World Cup. And getting back to us, Bolivia, Paraguay, like I just said and Roberto confirmed, they'd never actually won or got a point in Paraguay until now. In all competitions, we've played 11 times against them here. There have been 2 draws, the 2-2 draw last time, and the first game in the Copa America in '99, which was at the Defensores. And apart from that, Paraguay have won their other 9 home games here.
And certainly it's a lot of pressure really on Paraguay's shoulders to really keep that form, because I think, especially given the way that Paraguay have kind of had records broken in the last few years. We're even talking about this on the day that they lose to Argentina for the first time in Buenos Aires in over 50 years. So, people are a bit pessimistic that a record like this, not only having never lost to Bolivia in Asuncion, but also the fact that Bolivia haven't won an away game in so long. So it comes into that. And, I guess going into this game on Tuesday, do you feel as if though Paraguay really are under that pressure? And do you feel that even for Bolivia's case, despite everything that's been going on for them, that this is the perfect opportunity for them to make history, essentially?
On paper, yeah, but in practice, I've got my serious doubts. Actually, talking about records and Ralph's connection, didn't we talk a couple of years ago that Bolivia and San Marino were going head to head on the record of most time without an away win? Because Bolivia, the last time Bolivia won a qualifier away was in August 1993. When they won in Venezuela, which was, I don't know if you were even alive.
I wasn't. Maybe Ralph was a little kid by then, so definitely not me.
And going back the defeat to Argentina, the last time we lost to Argentina away, I think I was 4 months old. that was 8 or 9. Paraguay went 8 or 9 games unbeaten in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, so there's really a lot and to go into. So I guess, go to my question as well to really close it out. Well, kind of a 2-parter really. How can Bolivia, try to expose this Paraguay team and make history? And also on the back, in reverse, how can Paraguay be able to exploit Bolivia side, especially a Paraguay side that desperately needs to score goals. It's been a while since Paraguay have been able to score goals in an official game, especially in a game that matters like this one. So what's the deal for both these teams for this game?
It's actually quite an interesting question, because watching us last night, I got the feeling that Paraguay had sort of turned the page, and when they actually tried to attack, they were like more, like they had more self-belief. And if you ask me, my personal opinion, I think that it will come good for Paraguay, because I think the Garnero knows, he's very attack-minded, and I think that Bolivia are hobbling around in a way. Now, having said that, I mean, you never know what's going on in people's heads, and all the things that you and Ralph are saying are quite true. I mean, it does play on you mentally, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that Paraguay haven't scored a goal in these 3 games, it's already like a burden. Plus the fact that against Bolivia, we really do have the baggage of history with us. I mean, even if it's only through a half goal, I mean, Paraguay have got to win. I think that's what it all comes down to. And on Bolivia's side, I think they will try, but I think they've got their heads down, and it's like I was saying at the beginning, it's a very sad situation, and it's very, very complicated and complex, and I don't see any quick or easy answers, and they haven't really got the players. I mean, I was trying to put together, if you'll just let me quickly go through the team that I think that they'll play tomorrow.
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it. On Tuesday, and that they've got Lampe in goal. And then they've got Hakin, who normally plays in Colombia, and Sagredo at the back. Then they've got Diego Medina on the right. He's a really good right back who gets forward, but he's a bit lightweight. So maybe Paraguay can exploit it down there. And then they've got Carlos Roca on the left, who plays for the strongest. And then you'll have to have Villamil and Justiniano, who are like the linchpins in the centre of midfield for Bolivar. And they've been called up again after they hadn't played for Paraguay for Bolivia for about a year. Then Dani Bejarano, who plays in Cyprus, and Boris Cespedes, who plays in Switzerland, will probably make up the other 2 midfielders. And then up front, you've got Martins, and you've got that Jaume Cuellar, who plays in for Barcelona B in Ecuador. And if they don't use him, then they'll probably use Carmelo Algarañas, who is another Martins. He's like 34 or 35 years old. And apart from that, I don't really think they've got any players of caliber who they could put in to stand up to us. So it'll be interesting to see how it actually pans out mentally and physically.
100%. And just before we close it off here, we of course like to do predictions like we do with all our guests here. What is ultimately your prediction for this game between Paraguay and Bolivia in Asuncion on Tuesday?
Oh, I'm caught in 2 minds. Either we'll win 1-0, like nail biting, or we'll win like 4-1 or something.
You're Paraguay, I would imagine. Paraguay, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
Bolivia.
no, totally. Yeah. I think Paraguay will win 4-1.
4-1. Okay, yeah. We said I said 3-0. Ralph, I think you also said 4-1 in your prediction. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think I said 4-0.
4-0. Yeah. So no, I mean this is it. Like this is the time for Paraguay to get the goals, get the wins, and hopefully bounce back, because they don't.
We've got. Sorry, I'm talking as a Paraguayan now, not as a Bolivian
No,
expert.
No, it's fine. It's all good. Don't worry about it.
I just think that with the new format, Paraguay have to try and aim for 27 points and assume that you're not going to win at home against Argentina and Brazil. So you've got to try and get 4 away points. And if we do that, then I think we probably qualify, because you need it's 6.5 places now, isn't it? So
yep.
that's the way I think it's gonna go. Although it's very surprising last night with Venezuela, wasn't it? They've thrown the spanner in the works.
Yeah, I think everything went wrong for Paraguay last night, so that puts extra pressure on this Bolivia game to get all 3 points. They definitely can't afford to draw like they did last time.
Yeah. No, we just have to do it now.
For sure. And obviously we'll be talking about that game, like the Argentina game, in our next episode. But Tim, thank you so much for coming on. It was a real pleasure. And to close off this episode, for myself, Roberto Rojas, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening to this preview. See you soon.